Hello, and welcome to the Goldfinger Report. My name is Todd David Goldfinger. I'm here with you today with a very amazing pioneer, not just in the field of psychiatry, but as we forge forward into the psychedelic realm of things. And what does that mean? We have for you today, Dr. Rick Strassman. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Todd. Good to be here.
Thank you. So I have some questions for you. You've written two magnificent books. One of them, they have to be mentioned, I believe, every time, is the DMT, the spirit molecule, and also DMT and the soul prophecy.
The soul of prophecy.
The soul of prophecy. I want to get that right. So maybe you can, the floor is yours. You can tell the audience what it is that you do and what it is your research is about.
Well, back in the day, I studied a drug called DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is made in the human body and seems to be made in the brain, because I was interested in looking for a biological basis of spiritual experience. And I thought maybe DMT levels rose when you meditated, when you took psychedelics, when you dreamed, had near-death experiences, Buddhist enlightenment, those kinds of things. So I studied DMT. It was the first new American research with psychedelics in a generation. I started in 1990, gave 400 doses of DMT to about 50 or so volunteers. Started some psilocybin research too before I wrapped things up in 95. The study itself was funded by the NIH, National Institutes of Health, specifically National Institute of Drug Abuse. And it was a fairly straightforward psychopharmacology study. I'm a psychiatrist. I got some extra training in clinical psychopharmacology research. Dose response work, normal volunteers, characterized, the effects of DMT as exhaustively as you could biologically and psychologically. But one of my implicit, goals was to determine the spiritual characteristics of the DMT state. And in particular, I was wondering if the pharmacologically spiritual. The spiritual platform that I brought to bear, or the perspective I brought to bear, was based on Buddhist enlightenment as the goal of spiritual practice and training. And that goal is the formless state, what's called sunyata, or emptiness, no form, feeling, consciousness, perception, or volition. Those were the kinds of states I was expecting the volunteers to have, and the volunteers were expecting them as well, because most of them were involved in some kind of Eastern religious practice. So we didn't coach people or educate them or steer them in any direction to have any particular kind of experience. We just told them it was fast acting, and it was because we injected it intravenously, and short. The peak effects occur somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. We also told the volunteers to expect that with the higher doses anyway, they would lose awareness of their bodies, and to not fear, we were holding down the fort. So other than those, very basic instructions, we just told people to have their own trip and to come back and report to us, what it was like. To my surprise and to the volunteers' surprise, the vast majority of experiences were not, enlightenment, emptiness kinds of experiences, what I call the mystical unitive state, where there's no time, space, no individual personality left. You just merge with, the source of all existence. Paradoxes abound, those kinds of things, or the resolution of paradoxes abounds. Instead, the experiences were what I ended up calling interactive and relational. The state was full of content. The personality was maintained. There was interaction between the contents of the experience and the volunteer's mind. Questions and answers and healing and those kinds of things. So after I finished the study, with the answer, well, there were a number of goals. The ostensible goals I accomplished. Could you do Schedule 1 studies in humans again? And the answer was yes. Could you do it safely? Yes. Could you generate good data? And we did. We also developed a new questionnaire to quantify the DMT state, which is still in use actually. But the implicit goal, or the implicit question was also answered, which was, DMT was psychedelic. It was not mystical unitive. It was psychedelic.
And what does that mean for the audience who doesn't know?
Mm-hmm. Well, psychedelic means mind manifesting or mind disclosing. So instead of the drug having any inherent spiritual properties or any inherent anything, it only magnified and made more clear, more real, more truthful, more convincing, more compelling, things which were already latent, or not even all that latent in the person's mind already. So for example, one of the volunteers was a nurse with a long-standing interest in the near-death state. She had read every book on the near-death state, was hoping to have a near-death experience as a volunteer, and she did. The one mystical experience took place in somebody that was a religious studies major in college, was interested in the mystical experience, and he had one. A software designer encountered the source of ones and zeros. A couple of subjects with some history of trauma as kids were able to work through that. Somebody that used to work as a military security guy encountered these huge cactuses. He said, "Where's your ID?" These were all things which were already latent, or more or less conscious in the volunteers' minds, and just kind of blossomed forth in a lot more clarity and convincingness. So that's what I mean by psychedelic. Mind manifesting, mind disclosing. That they didn't really, or the effect of the drug didn't really reveal anything new other than the existence of this incredibly weird content-filled, colorful world. So I went back to the drawing board with respect to the model, the spiritual model anyway, because spiritual questions were always of interest to me. And by around that time, I had parted ways with my Buddhist community and was free to re-explore my Jewish roots. Started reading the Hebrew Bible, encountered this idea of the prophetic experience, which is quite phenomenologically similar to the DMT state. Colors and visions and voices, and more real than real, interactive and relational. So that spurred me to my study of the Hebrew Bible, and ultimately the publication of DMT and the Soul of Prophecy.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. Wow. What an amazing human being. Thank you. So what is the spirit molecule, and how can it help to treat humanity?
Well, I ended up calling DMT the spirit molecule because it seems to allow entry into what people refer to as a spiritual state, disembodied, convincingly real, inhabited, full of content. So I think rather than, well, keep in mind, I came up with that title in 1999. So my thinking has evolved significantly since then. But still, to the extent that the DMT state shares features with spiritual experience, it's I think it still remains a reasonable term. Well, DMT is a psychedelic. Other psychedelics are seeing use in psychotherapy, for wellness. And DMT is short acting, but still it is very psychedelic. And there are people working on extended state DMT experiences, where you just continually infuse it over a longer period of time. It also increases the development of new neurons from stem cells, and also increases the complexity of their connections. So it's being studied for stroke rehab, for traumatic brain injury. Other psychedelics are being studied, to see if they can be useful, for degenerative neurological diseases like Alzheimer's or Lou Gehrig's disease. So there's a explosion in applicability or studies on applying psychedelics, including DMT, to a whole host of both neurological syndromes, psychiatric syndromes, as well as improving wellness. DMT is the visionary ingredient in ayahuasca, which is an Amazonian brew, which is increasingly popular among wellness circles and retreat centers. So psychedelics seem to improve your meditation, nature appreciation, change your metaphysical beliefs. There was just a paper a few days ago saying that people who trip attribute consciousness to all kinds of things, like animals and plants, even inanimate objects. So the list goes on. I think ultimately we're going to find out that psychedelics are super placebos. They basically give you what you want. So if you want to become a serial killer, like Charles Manson's family.
Don't try this at home, folks. Don't try this at home.
You take LSD to cement your weird ideas. So you could take LSD to cement any ideas. That a chair has consciousness, or that you're the Messiah, or any number of things. So that's the importance of set and setting. You need to set things up, both with your with yourself and with the environment in which you trip, including the other people in the room with you. To steer the effect in the direction that you ultimately want it to be. And you need peer review, you need supervision, you need follow-up, all those things.
Wonderful. My next question for you is regarding altered states. What are they? And people with so-called, let's say, mental illness, psychosis, how can people benefit from altered states when, if we face it, it looks like Western medicine, or what was called Western medicine, this bullying kind of thing, this capitalistic kind of machine, a mongoloid type thing. I don't want to go into details, but it's just that it became a monstrosity. And it seems like the only exit ramp, the exit strategy for us to survive as a human race is the medicinal use, practical use of psychedelics.
Well, altered states are, they're alterations in your consciousness. You think differently, your perceptions change, your sense of body is altered. The emotions are more powerful or unusual. So it depends. Whether they're adaptive or maladaptive. That's where you need to be working on other aspects of yourself other than simply inducing an altered state. I've got a good friend who enters into altered states, but is simply for the fun or the excitement, and they're not very adaptive because they end up in the mental hospital because she just goes off half cocked, as opposed to channeling that energy and the creativity and the unusual perceptions and ideas in a beneficial manner, or even in any constructive manner. So it isn't simply having altered states; it's applying them, extracting information from them to both make yourself and the world a better place.
That sounds wonderful. So the messages, the information that we receive, whether it be when washing the dishes or meditation or brushing our teeth, the mundane things, when we receive messages, when we're a conduit, when we're open to this, what does it mean when we see, for example, the purple goddess?
Well, the visions which occur are only possible using the raw material in your mind that's already there. So you're not going to visualize something that consists of parts that you've never encountered previously. So the information is kind of garbed or clothed or manifests using imagery and components of imagery which are pre-existent. So you see a purple goddess, and you've obviously, or somebody who sees a purple goddess has experienced purple before, has experienced that kind of image before. Female versus male, goddess versus demon. So depending on your intellect, your mind, your thinking, faculty, you could extract information from a purple goddess. What does purple mean to you? What does a goddess mean to you? And hopefully, or theoretically, you will have exchanged some information with that purple goddess. You could ask her questions, and she would answer you, or she would do things to you. You would do things to her. So that kind of experience would take place in the setting of who you are, and what you're looking for at the time. So just seeing a purple goddess and going, oh wow, that's not as useful as, for example, spending some time hanging out with her and asking for help in some form or another.
Sure. The one time that I was able to, if you don't mind me saying this, freebase DMT in 2020 over the summer with a guide who is no longer with us. And the experience that I was able to have was the waiting room. And the waiting room was also, I would liken it to maybe being tickled, my rib cage being tickled by God. And whatever depression I was having for almost 30 years, where I couldn't get out of bed, and people were starting to think I was a useless human being. This DMT freebase trip, I took 3 strong pulls. I'm not advising this for anybody to try at home. Don't do it. Wait till the FDA approves it. That's what this is for. So
Right.
yes, is that we're going to have wonderful treatment for the people, because when I entered the waiting room and I had it might have been my dad. It might have been, whatever it was. because I lost my dad. So I thought maybe it was him. When the second time that I vaped DMT, just a little, little vape of it, and basically there was a reflection of light in the corner of the room, and I just looked up at that. It kind of became like a jellyfish, and then it peeled back, and then the beings of light, as it were smiling at me, and it seemed so familiar. I thought maybe it was me. I didn't know who it was. I didn't know who it was. It was a part. I didn't know how to explain that or understand it. So thankfully there is peer psychedelic support, but there's only so many times you can call. And so who do we have today on the show? Rick Strassman, to answer all of my lovely questions.
Right. Well, it feels familiar. That's a kind of a weird thing about it. Yeah. Well, it's a strange experience. It's familiar. It's the weirdest thing ever. It feels more real than real. Yeah, it completely replaces ongoing mental contents. Yeah. So yeah, it's a great mystery. What's even more mysterious is that that the brain makes DMT. So that's a and the concentrations are quite high. They're as high as concentrations of dopamine and serotonin. So the hunt is on for a DMT neurotransmitter system, the discovery of which I think will be rather revolutionary, because it'll establish the existence of this crazy psychedelic as a neurotransmitter. So that's going to raise a lot of questions as to what's going on.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Because for me, the DMT experience was better than any kind of psychopharmacological experiment that they were willing to try on me, where at some point I was taking 5 different kinds of medications. And now I'm just taking 1 milligram of risperidone.
Yeah, I think, the existence of, DMT in the brain, raises a lot of questions. So yeah, and I've gotten a lot of emails from people and about their DMT or other psychedelic experiences. Yeah, and some of them are just miraculous cures. People that have been using heroin for for decades, had a couple of massive DMT experiences and they just stopped using. On the other hand, and I make a point of repeatedly stating I don't encourage anyone to take drugs. And as a counterpoint to those miraculous cures, there are horror stories as well. People just smoking DMT all day long for weeks and weeks, and they end up in the hospital or in jail, and their families are completely at their wits' ends.
Yeah, it's sometimes too much sacred information for one person to understand and comprehend. And what I understood from just example, like the Fireside Project, they say, when you get the message, hang up the phone.
Well, that's right. A lot of people are curious as to how many times I've smoked DMT. They say, oh, the guy must have smoked a million times. Like I only had one big, DMT experience. This was 1986, I think. Yeah. And, my life was changed and I just, got on to, doing it.
Great. Well, we would love to have you on the show again sometime. We think you're fantastic, and the work that you've done is there. Just to put it into layman's terms, is helping humanity in a very, very big way, and people have to understand the lingo because they see Joe Rogan and they understand, okay, he's a big celebrity and this and that, but in layman's terms, how can it help the common person? And we wait for the FDA to approve this, because once the FDA approves this, the world is going to be a much better place, because when the FDA approves it, it's America doing it first, and then everyone else will follow suit, because all the world's faiths can be explained with this one compound. Is that not correct?
Is that not correct? Well, I would say it's more complicated than that. It's a challenging field. I mean, clearly there's pros and cons to taking psychedelics. the most important thing is to educate yourself. You really need to be able to provide informed consent, either to yourself if you decide to take mushrooms. Are you consenting to take mushrooms in an informed manner, or are you just going off, kind of on a wild goose chase? Speaking of which, educating, I have a new book coming out in June called The Psychedelic Handbook. It's on Amazon already for pre-order. And it's kind of a counterpoint to Michael Pollan's book. Michael Pollan's book is kind of exciting, gee whiz. I mean, aren't these the most amazing drugs you'll ever encounter? And all these kind of superheroes behind the scenes. But my book, it's a lot more sober. I mean, I've been in the field for a long time, and I know what I'm talking about. It's not like I dropped acid twice and I wrote a book. So I'm not, glorifying the potential benefits, and I'm not, minimizing the potential risks. In fact, I apologize in the book once or twice, and I say, I don't mean to, bum you out or anything, but it's important to know the risks, and, to recognize adverse effects and to deal with them, and, to do what you can, to prevent them in the first place, which involves, the drugs themselves, your own health, the people that you're around, the model in which you trip. So I think there's a lot more to it than just, these are wonder drugs. They were, psychiatry's, wonder drugs, back in the 50s and the 60s. And, then, because of unsubstantiated
the Nixon
claims,
era,
they became the horror drugs, and, people stopped studying them. Nobody even knew about them in, medical school, back in the 70s. So I think, we don't want to, minimize risk, and we don't want to glorify potential benefits either. So my new book's coming out, The Psychedelic Handbook, and it'll be out in June.
That's great. Well, thank you, Dr. Rick Strassman, for being on this program. Millennium TV 24 thanks you.
Well, you're welcome, Todd. It was a pleasure.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the audience in closing before we go? We would love to see you again, of course.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're going to trip, and I'm, like I said, I don't encourage anyone to take drugs, but still, I mean, people are taking drugs, and, more and more people will with legalization and decriminalization. It's important to inform yourself, be educated, take care to minimize risk, take care to optimize potential benefit. So just learn as much as you can about the substances before experimenting with them.
Thank you, Dr. Rick Strassman. This has been the Goldfinger Report. For more information about the Goldfinger Report and Millennium TV, check out www.millenniumnews24.com, and also check out toddgoldfinger.com. Thanks for being with us. Peace.
Okay, good.